Like to read a psalm. Psalm 84 is one of my favorite psalms, and we also know that it was a favorite psalm of both Johann Sebastian Bach and Johannes Brahms.
All right.
Because both of them set parts of Psalm 84 to music in some of their greatest works. Bach in his great cantata Gott, der Herr ist Sonne und Schild, and Johannes Brahms in his Requiem, Wie lieblich sind deine Wohnungen. And this psalm, I think it's about hospitality. So it goes like this. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, indeed it faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow finds a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young. At your altars, O Lord of hosts, my God and my King. Happy are those who live in your house, ever singing your praise. Happy are those whose strength is in you, and whose heart are the highways to Zion. As they go through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The early rain also covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. The God of gods will be seen in Zion. O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Behold our shield, O God. Look on the face of your anointed. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to live inside the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. He bestows favor and honor. No good thing does the Lord withhold from those who walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, happy is everyone who trusts in you. O God of infinite power, infinite wisdom, infinite love and grace and forgiveness. How cramped our lives and our faith in you are so much of the time. Cramped by busyness, anxiety, pride. And we thank you for bringing us into this holy place, this place of rest, repose, and new energy. We thank you that you have shown us hospitality and calling us to your house, this holy place, and even more, to calling us into your heart through creation and our baptism. We ask for a blessing on each of us here at this time, a blessing that we will not keep to ourselves, that they will go and share with others. We ask that we might be blessed to be a blessing, so that we might be as hospitable to others as you have been to us. We ask you to grace our presence in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Hospitality. I have to say, I feel like I felt at my wedding. I didn't get married until late in life. I didn't get married until I was 47. So if you know people that aren't married, tell them there's hope. I'm living hope that somebody finally would marry me at age 47. And at age 47, I had presided at a lot of weddings. Right? So I thought I knew what a wedding felt like, having been in a lot of them. But when I entered University of St. Chapel, and RZ and Carrie were there, I had this amazing feeling. It was one of the few times where everybody in that church was somebody I liked. I mean, I can't always say that on a Sunday morning. To be truthful, to be honest. But then there was, this whole church was packed with people that I liked and loved. And feelings are mutual. And so I feel that same way here. What we did last night, we'd done that once before. Carl was there for that. Where are you, Carl? And it's an amazing feeling. I mean, I wrote down what you said not because I'm checking up on you. This is not, any Lutheran Gestapo here. Oh, so-and-so said that. I'm very factually correct. But because I just want to cherish your stories. Every single one of you said something that really was amazing to me. And so I want to thank you for being here. And I hope you enjoy this because I know I will. So how did I get interested in hospitality? I'm turning 75 this year. And what I know, by the way, we have 3 PhDs in psychology here and 1 experienced therapist. So we've got people with heavy psychological firepower. I have to watch what I say. But I think I'm correct in saying that one of the developmental tasks of later life is what is called a life review. You're forced by circumstances to look at yourself. and Erik Erikson says we have a choice in later life between integrity or despair. And integrity means how do you put all the pieces of your life together? All that stuff that you did back when, and all that stuff you said then, and experienced, and how does that all fit together? I mean, hopefully by then you've achieved certain things in your career. You don't have to worry about that. You've achieved intimacy, at least with one other, all that. You've taken care of all that. Now you say, what sense does my life make? So I've been looking back at my life, and the first reason why I got interested in hospitality is I realized that I was a beneficiary of so much hospitality. It's just staggering to think of how many people over the course of my life invited me into their home and into their lives, and has made me so much the better for it. It just struck me. This is just incredible. So I've been thinking about that for the last couple of years. And then I picked up a book at Fuller Seminary by a woman by the name of Christine Pohl. I'll show you her picture later on, called Making Room. Hospitality as a lost, or something like, we need to recover this as a tradition. And then I discovered there's a big literature out there about the last 15 years of a lot of Christian writers, foremost among them Henry Nouwen. He started that in 1975, actually, so he was really the pathfinder. A lot of Christian writers are writing about hospitality. And as we'll do, hopefully, here, and saying that there's a lot of that in the Bible that maybe we hadn't seen before. So that was the second thing that got me interested, is the vast literature. And then the third thing was that I think we're desperately in need of hospitality these days. I'm getting the feeling right now that I did in the 1960s, terrible 60s, where I was in Berkeley in the 60s, where you're either a part of the problem or you're part of the solution. There was no middle ground. No middle ground. I remember a Lutheran young woman at University Lutheran Chapel, she actually said this, that she was in love with the poor and oppressed, and in order to do that, she just might have to kill a cop. Oh. I mean, that was Berkeley in the 60s. Yeah. And we're getting to the point where, I mean, the amount of rage that people experience about other folks at other side of the political spectrum and other different interest groups in society, I mean, it's just, ratcheting up, I think, to dangerous levels. So it's the kind of the confluence of those three things: my own personal experience, what a lot of stuff that's going on in the Christian community all across the board, Lutheran, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, as well as what we're facing in our society. It leads me to think this is a really important topic. So I'd like to explore that with you somewhat and gather your wisdom. So what are the objectives? When I was thinking about this too, and you reinforced it last night, I realized that I'm in a kind of a different space from Adam Francisco, Paul Meyer, and Bill Creasy. Now, those of us who've been on some of these retreats, I mean, I learned a lot from Adam Francisco about Islam, and he was he had a lot of information to his grasp that all of us, I don't think, have, you know, about Islam, about Islamic Christian relationships, about Islamic texts, and all that. Paul Meyer, a great historian, knows so much more about, you know, the historical background, the underpinnings of the Bible, remarkable intellect. And Bill Creasy, to be able to look at the sweep of the presence of the Holy Spirit in the Scriptures, you know, breathtaking. And so I'm thinking about this, and I realize you know as much about this topic as I do. And like I said, you proved it last night. You know what hospitality looks like, what it feels like, what it is like. You've experienced it. And I'm sure, well, I know this for a fact, most of you can throw better parties than my wife and I can. I know for an absolute fact, all of you are a better cook than I am. No doubt about that one. So what can I possibly do to people that know as much or more than I do? You're as smart as I am. You're as spiritual as I am. Well, so what I thought we might try to do, objective number one, is to try to find a way for us to deal with our issues about hospitality. I think all of us desire to be hospitable. All of us. We desire to be the kind of loving, gracious, kind person that God has meant us to be, Jesus Christ. But stuff gets in our way. Stuff gets in my way. And so I thought, you know, this is objective number one, as opposed to, you know, gaining a lot of factual knowledge, which is important, really important. I mean, those three people I mentioned before, you know, brilliant intellects. I would like us to focus on, you know, ourselves and what it is that, what are our issues about it, and how can we, you know, in just a brief while up here, you know, iron a few of those out, gain clarity on them, and find a way, you know, to be a little bit more hospitable. So that's number one. Number two, what I think I can bring to this is I've read a few books. I've thought about this for a couple of years now. And I'd like to make a case that will help with your issues, that hospitality is a core Christian virtue. It's not a peripheral Christian virtue. It's not an inconsequential Christian virtue. It's a core virtue. I discovered as soon as I set this as a title that Henry Nouwen says the same thing. So, good. That I think that allows us to view our faith in a different way. It's just a slight twist, but I think is very helpful. And so I'd like to pursue that with you. So that's objective number two. And objective number three is, I really hope you'll enjoy this. There was a Frenchman, hate to say something good about a Frenchman, but very so often we're reduced to doing that. Frenchman in the 19th century said, joy is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. Joy is the most infallible. I was trained to think that theologically correct thinking is the most, or other kinds of things, but joy, I think, is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. And I don't know about you, but I can be a lot more hospitable when I'm joyful. You know, when I'm joyful, you know, the stuff my wife does that drives me crazy doesn't drive me quite so crazy. You know, and I can be a lot more hospitable to her. And when I'm joyful, you know, I can look at people that I really don't like in my neighborhood, and I can be a whole lot more hospitable to them. So I hope when this all shakes down, I hope you will. I really enjoy. I've got some, I think, really good pictures. Diane and I were talking about pictures, and some really good pictures by some great artists who I think can give us some joy. So, are these objectives okay with you all? We know that? Okay. And also, in light with that, we're going to do some small group stuff, okay, so that you get a chance. Because I really want your input, want your wisdom, because I really mean that. You know as much as I do about hospitality, and you've proven that. So, I think when we tend to think of hospitality, we think of something like this, right? Having over for tea, and lifting your pinky. Hospitality is something effete. It's something genteel. Not bad, but not that important. I mean, I suppose, if you didn't do it, if people wouldn't like you. So, but hospitality tends to have the odor of elitism. It smacks of that, and it's optional. Okay? So that's one thing, and I think as we go along, we'll see that hospitality, the way the Bible looks at it, way on the other end. Or if we don't think of hospitality that way, we think of it this way: the hospitality industry. And it's a big industry. Just a quick internet search is in 2015, hotel business alone was $550 billion, just hotels. And when you fold in airlines and restaurants and other, we're looking at close to $2 trillion. So people spend a lot of money to be taken care of. We spend money to have other people be hospitable to us. And sometimes we spend a lot of money. It's really interesting, once again, just a brief internet search. Of the 20 most expensive places to stay in the United States, 17 of them are in the western United States. Did you know that?
Yeah. Because
they want to avail themselves of what God has given free of charge. of this amazing, most of the most expensive hotels want to look at God's creation and allow people to soak in the kinds of things that we're soaking in here. The most expensive place to stay is the ranch at Rock Creek in Montana, western Montana. It will cost you $2,800 a night to stay there. Just a night. But that's for just your ordinary rich person. If for the really rich, this is the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Okay. The penthouse suite at the Beverly Wilshire rents for $15,000 a night. So you have to be a Saudi prince, obviously, to be able to stay at something like that. So we tend to think of hospitality that way, in this big industry, which is a wonderful industry, nothing wrong with it. But for most of human history, hospitality was a matter of life or death. This is an actual slide. It's a real slide. This is not a fun slide. Any of you know Pastor Bill Hemingway? He was in Costa Mesa for a number of years. He was my roommate when I was at Concordia Senior College. And we were the odd couple, because I was a skinny guy from LA, and he's a big, fat strong, husky ranch guy from Presho, South Dakota, right in the middle of South Dakota. And he would tell tales about winter in South Dakota, about how people would, in the middle of a storm, would come knocking on their door and say, "We can't make it. We allow us to stay there." And absolutely, I mean, that's the way he did it. The one time I was in South Dakota, it was for a wedding, and I was out running on one of the highways there, and these cars and trucks would come along, and they wave at me, saying, "Do I know you?" That's what you do in South Dakota. You just wait. I mean, because you might need that person somewhere along the line, and they might need you. It's a matter of life or death, and not only in winter environments, but environments in which the Bible was written, in desert environments, where there were elaborate rituals of hospitality, so that you could take care of others and that they in turn could take care of you. So far from being some sort of industry where people spend a lot of money, this is a matter of life or death. But not only that, in the arts, hospitality has played a really big role. The most moving scene in the Iliad is depicted in this scene. You know, all the fighting, Achilles and Patroclus and all these guys. I mean, this fundamental epic of Western civilization. And then towards the end, the Trojans are getting a licking. And Hector, the great hero of the Trojans, knows that all is lost. They're going to lose. And he's probably going to get killed. So what does he do? He goes back to his wife. And I'm sorry, I'm going to do this a lot, I'm afraid. So. And he looks for her, and she's not at home. And she's over. Finally, he finds her. And she offers him comfort and solace. And one of the coolest little scenes is his little boy, Astyanax. He wants to hold his little boy, but he's in all this armor, so his little boy shrinks away from him. You know, he says, "That's okay, I'm going to stand up for you." I mean, it's just a great scene. And it's a scene of hospitality, one of the most moving in all of literature, from, what's Homer's dates, 800 BC, something like that. Do you know what this scene is? You probably do. It was a big musical on...
Les Mis. Yeah, Les Miserables.
Les Miserables, this famous scene from Victor Hugo's novel. Remember, right at the start, Jean Valjean has gotten out of prison. He's desperate, and this bishop takes him in. And what does Jean Valjean do in exchange? He steals the silver. He almost kills the bishop to be able to take stuff, but he doesn't. He steals the silver, and he goes out and he gets caught by the cops, and the gendarmes bring him back. And what does the bishop do? You forgot the candlesticks. I'm so glad you came back. Rather than saying, yeah, apprehend this man, give me life. It's just a great scene of hospitality and enormous generosity and forgiveness. Do you recognize this? I have some notes here. Rivendell is a place of hospitality, of respite. This is the way it puts it. Frodo was now safe in the last homely house east of the sea. That house was, as Bilbo had long ago reported, a perfect house. Whether you like food or sleep, or storytelling or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear, and sadness. All of them, the ponies as well, grew refreshed and strong in a few days there. Their clothes were mended, as well as their bruises, their tempers, and their hopes. Their bags were filled with food and provisions, light to carry, but strong to bring them over the mountain passes. Their plans were improved with the best advice. So the time came to Midsummer Eve, and they were going on again with the early sun in the midsummer morning. It's a place of refreshment, new energy, new life. One of the first foreign films I saw was Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal. Here is a teenager trying to be intellectual, going to see foreign films. It's just so cool. And you know the story about this movie. If you've seen it, the images are still striking. The night, what's the actor's name? I can't remember his name. Frank, help me out.
Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow, thank you. I was thinking it's Liv Ullmann. That's not Liv. So you got a 50% chance with Bergman. And this knight's coming back from the Crusades, and he's jaundiced with war and carnage and everything. And he's going back home, hasn't seen his wife or been to his castle in ages. And so who greets him on the shore of this lake? The death. He says, "It's time. I've come for you." And the knight says, "No, I'm not ready yet. I haven't found what I need to find out." And so he challenges him to a chess match. And Death says, "Fine, but I always win. I never lose." So for the rest of the movie, it is interspersed with moves on the chess table, and the knight goes to see what's happening in Swedish society and the plague and disease and social chaos. It's terrible. Until near the end of the movie, he meets a traveling actor and his wife and their little boy. And they offer him hospitality. And all of a sudden, he's at peace. And Bergman, being the good son of a Lutheran pastor, the young woman gives him strawberries and milk. It's not bread and wine, but it's as close as a Swedish atheist can get.
You said strawberries and milk?
Strawberries and milk.
Strawberries and milk.
And finally, he finds peace. It was hospitality that brought it to him, the hospitality of this young couple. And so finally he can go back and he can die. But updating that is Mr. Denzel Washington. Denzel is taking the directing, and this is the first movie that he directed. True story, Antoine Fisher, have you seen it?
Yes.
Yeah? I think it's a really good movie. And it's about this little boy by the name of Antoine. And it starts out with like a dream or a vision that Antoine had. And he's walking through this field. His father abandoned him, and then his mother grew tired of him, so he had nobody in life. And he's walking through this field. All of a sudden he sees a barn, and the barn door opens up, and here's this big banquet table, just filled with all kinds of delights. And the people gather around, and they, "Hi, Antoine. Antoine, how are you?" Everybody greets him, and he comes to the head of the table, and has his favorite meal. Pancakes, like we had this morning. And he sits down, and what joy! And then he wakes up, and it's a dream, and he's back in the Navy, and he's out of control. I mean, he's sitting on so much anger. He's going to get dishonorably discharged if he doesn't watch it. And so Denzel Washington is a Navy psychiatrist, and he starts talking to Denzel, but he does more than talk to him. He mentors him. He goes out of his way to take time with him. He invites him over to his home for dinner. Finally, Antoine has enough courage to go back to Cleveland, Ohio, yay, Cleveland, Ohio, where his mother was from, to try to find his mother, to see if there's any hope for a relationship with him. But there isn't. She rejects him again. But she has a brother, an uncle. The uncle says, you gotta come over. So they come over, and he brings all of the relatives, and they all come over and say, "Hey, Antoine," just like in his dream. And they have a big meal, and at the head of the meal are pancakes. I mean, it's a story of hospitality and what hospitality can mean and how healing it can be. So I think we're dealing with a really big topic. It obviously touches me. Bawling my eyes out here half the time. And I think it has so much power that it's so important for us to consider it. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to read the Bible, and hopefully read it with enjoyment. A lot of times reading the Bible can be a chore. And I'm going to enlist the aid of some great artists to help us read the Bible, to help us read it with enjoyment. And then some, if we have time, and I'm happy to jettison part of this and go in different directions if we like. Some early voices about hospitality after the Bible. We have a long tradition of Christian hospitality. And then some contemporary voices. If we have time to look at some implications and some speculations, it's always interesting to speculate. What might this mean? But most of all, stories. I just hope that you might have more stories. I've got some more stories. We have a God who believes in stories. God is a historical God, history stories. So we want to tell stories as well. So, Diane and I have the same dictionary. So you heard this last, and basically what I'm doing today is a commentary on your devotion last night. And that was just rich. I mean, it was all there. So you can leave. Get a copy, and we can go hiking.
I only have one picture.
One picture. So it's always good to stop off with the dictionary and see what the dictionary says. Definition: the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. Guests could be friends. Visitors, don't know them quite so well. Strangers, now it's getting interesting. And we'll find this to be very interesting when we look at some of the Latin and Greek words for this. And then we have the same synonyms. Great synonyms, except I found this to be very funny. Friendliness, warm reception, welcome, neighborliness, helpfulness, kindness, congeniality, cordiality, courtesy, amenability, generosity, warmth, entertainment, catering, food. Food. Show me the food. Sometimes that's all we want. We just want a good meal. You know? I thought this was really great. You know, it comes down to something, you know, very practical. Right. So what?
So basic.
So basic, you know, it's feeding people. You bet. And but yet so tremendously important, isn't it? So let's take that into the Latin roots of the word hospitality. Hospitality. This is very, very interesting. The Latin word for host is also the same word for guest. Interesting. You have to tell by the context whether it means host or guest. It's hospes, same thing. So it can mean host, guest, visitor, friend, stranger, foreigner. And as we look at some of these Bible stories, you begin to wonder who's the host and who's the guest. Henry Nouwen says, one of the reasons to show hospitality is the guests are bringing gifts. You know, that the hosts will oftentimes get as much as the guest will. You know? And we see that kind of encased in this Latin word. From that we get hostel, hospice, hospital. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? It was Christians that started these things. Because it was very, very unusual in the ancient world to take care of people that weren't your relatives or couldn't pay you back. You know? There's a lot of hospitality in the Roman world, but it's always based on, you do this, so then I will get it in return. But Christians started doing all this stuff without any thought of return. You know, I mean, it was a revolutionary idea. And Rodney Stark, a really important sociologist, says, what converted the Roman Empire? Love. Christians loved people. And it was a revolutionary kind of thing. So, hospice, but look at this. Related word is hostis, enemy. Dun, 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 hostile, right? Dun, 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 dun. The two are really close in sound. And enemy and stranger. And sometimes one of the reasons why we don't want to show hospitality is because we don't like those people. And they may be dangerous, maybe not physically dangerous, but they're dangerous to our politics. And they're dangerous to our worldview. And so hostility is kind of lurking around in this whole idea of hospitality. Let's go to the Greek New Testament. The word used in the New Testament is philoxenia. So do you see anything in these two words? In these
Love and stranger.
stranger. So what we see a lot, we see this used a lot in what word today? Xenophobia. We hear that a lot, don't we?
Yeah, it's fear of strangers.
Yeah. So it's fear of strangers. But what's interesting is the New Testament word is love of strangers. So the basic New Testament definition of hospitality is not necessarily love for my spouse, or not necessarily love for my family, not necessarily love for my friends. It's love for the stranger. It really stretches the idea of hospitality in a really, I think, important and interesting way. Well, what I like to do in our Bible study is to use hospitality as a lens to look at the Bible, at some Bible passages. And it's really interesting to take different lenses and turn the Bible. I've been reading the Bible off and on as an adult for over 50 years. And I've seen a lot of different lenses coming out. And I remember when I was in the seminary, people used the lens of existentialism and Marxism to look at the Bible, and psychoanalysis. And then along came structuralism and post-structuralism, and all kinds of things. And what's amazing is each one of these movements were basically setting out to demolish the Bible. So we don't need the Bible. What we need is this other whatever it happens to be. But the Bible always emerges stronger as a result of it. It always comes out standing taller. And so what I want to do is use the lens of hospitality to look at the Bible for just a second. So, can't go through the whole Bible. You're spared that. But we're going to look in the Old Testament, just briefly, three parts of the Old Testament. Jewish people say their Bible, the Hebrew Bible, has three parts. It's known by this acronym Tanakh. T stands for Torah, Na for Nevi'im, the prophets, Ketuvim, the writings. So the three parts of the Bible, the Torah, the law, the prophets, the writings, we'll touch on all three of those, just to see that when I'm trying to make the case that hospitality is a core virtue, you find it at all these levels. So we're going to start with the founding story of the Bible. Now, founding stories are really important. I'd like to ask Frank Glenn to come up here for a second. Frank is used to be an assistant director. Do you know what an assistant director is in Hollywood?
Another version of that is you're sort of the director of hospitality.
Hospitality, thank you.
Your job is to make people that are somewhat strange or a little odd, which would mostly be the directors, appear to be normal. You're standing on the streets of Beijing or New York City, you know.
I thought you were going to say an assistant director does everything, which basically
Well,
you do all the work and the director gets all the
You have a lot of responsibility with very little authority.
Yeah.
You're the guy in charge of safety, so you're the guy that says, no, we're not going to do that. And then there's people around you that make a lot more money that could have said we're going to do it anyway. So
Right.
Now, be problematic.
Now, Frank has done a lot of commercials over the years, among other things, and one of them, a very famous series of commercials about Hewlett-Packard. And HP has a founding story that's essential to HP's identity. And what's their founding
Well,
story?
the story goes back into the late 40s, early 50s at Palo Alto. David Packard and Jim Hewlett started the company in a craftsman-like garage in one of their guys' house. So in the late 90s, the advertising agency in charge came up with an idea to build this icon garage in the Forbidden City of Beijing, in front of the New York Stock Exchange, from a pyramid outside of Cairo.
So Frank's going to all these places and setting up the HP garage in front of him.
Setting it up on the River Seine in front of the Pont Neuf, Paris. And it was quite a challenge, because to find all that wood in all those different places was not an easy challenge for the art department. So it was a bit of a hustle to get it done.
So the founding story of HP, would you say, it's simple, it's basic, it's homegrown, and yet it applies around the world.
Right.
Would you say?
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
You may be seated.
Thank you, Rick. Go back to your band.
So much for a city.
Frank, along with Daniel and I, are members of the Symphony Snob Club. We go to the LA Philharmonic and we critique Gustavo Dudamel and one of the great orchestras of the world, so we're terribly snobbish about that. So a founding story, it's very important to the identity of Hewlett-Packard to have this founding story. So let me ask you a question. What is the founding story of the United States of America?
It's pretty muddy.
It's muddy. I was raised with a founding story, this is the way I was raised. The founding story of the United States was people escaping religious persecution came to America for reasons of religious freedom.
Right. Pilgrims being.
Be no taxation without representation.
And no taxation without. But another founding story is that the leaders of the American Revolution were deists who came also to get away from religion over there as well as religion over here. And religion was useful to keep people moral and ethical, but their God was a little bit different. That's the second founding story. And then there's a third founding story, which is that all these European people came over to oppress the natives. Things were better in 1491 than they ever were after 1492. So we have a very contentious situation right now as to what the founding story of the United States is. And I think as a result, we have a lot of disunity in this country because we can't agree on our founding story. So the founding story of the Bible is found in Genesis 12, 1-3. Just 3 verses. Can you pick it up? I know you know the verses, but it's so great to read. It's a hinge on which the whole rest of the Bible turns. Up until this point, God was dealing with humanity in general terms. As a whole, generally. But now, with this, it gets very specific. So would somebody kindly read Genesis 12, 1-3?
Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse. And by you all the families of the earth shall bless themselves.
Thank you. It's one of those breathtaking passages, so compressed, but so rich in meaning. The Lord of the universe, the creator of the universe, was demonstrated God's power in Genesis 1 through 11. Now that same God who called the universe into being calls a people into being. To be able to undo the sin and the chaos in the world. This will be a group of people that would be blessed. Why? To be a blessing. It's so important. They were blessed in order to be a blessing. And they were blessed to bless whom? All the nations of the earth. Stunning idea. Risky in the extreme. This tiny people is going to bless the whole world. But that is the founding story. And we're moving on. We'll move on quickly to see immediately, almost immediately, how Abraham was a blessing. And that is in Genesis 18, 1 to 15. Another really important passage. So just flip a couple more chapters down the line. A celebrated chapter. Genesis 18, 1 to 15. And would somebody else kindly read this?
And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of
The
Mamre.
oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, Do as you have said. Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes. Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. And he took curds and milk, and the calf that he had prepared, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, Where is your wife Sarah? And he said, There in the tent. Then one said, I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in a year each. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I have grown old, and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child, now that I am old? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah will have a son. But Sarah denied, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, Oh yes, you did laugh.
Kind of love that thing. You laughed. No, I didn't laugh. You laughed. You didn't laugh. I mean, reading the Bible is just such a trip.
He said, she said.
He said, she said, exactly. This is the first time that God tells Abraham that he's actually going to have a son. Before he said, you see the stars of as many people as the stars of the heavens. So this is a really dramatic announcement. But do you notice, I mean, a number of things. You notice what a blessing Abraham was. It's the heat of the day. It's not the time that you want to go out and meet strangers and show hospitality to them. It's like Georgia in the middle of the summer, But what does Abraham do when he sees them? What does he do?
Goes out to meet them.
Not only goes, what does he do? He runs out to meet them. There's a number of touches in this story to show how extravagant Abraham's hospitality. He just doesn't go when he sees. He doesn't wait for them to come to him, which he could. He runs out to meet them. And then he says, if I find favor, can I provide a little something? He said, so what little something does he show them? Lots of somethings. Lots of bread, lots of milk. He kills a calf. He does all of this kind of stuff, it's just, we would say it's over-the-top kind of hospitality. And then, it says, first of all, it says the Lord appeared to Abraham. But what does Abraham see? He just sees 3 men. He just sees 3 men. And then finally, then the Lord does reveal himself and says something to him. And this hospitality is blessed by a great blessing in return. That actually something impossible, a miracle, God's going to do a miracle, and give him the key to that future that he promised him before. That he was actually going to have all these nations be blessed through his own heir. It's just a marvelous story, rich in detail and humor and interest. And it's so interesting that some great painters down through history have painted it. This has been depicted by all kinds of artists. Many, many mosaics like this beautiful one. Here's Abraham and the three men, or the three angels, in a mosaic from, I think, around the 5th or 6th century, something like that. Beautifully described. The most famous icon ever written. By the way, you don't paint icons, you write them. That's what the Orthodox do. It's not a work of art. It's written because it's God's word. Icons are considered sacred in God's words. This is the Holy Trinity. This is an enhanced version. But here are the three angels who were actually depicted by Rublev in the 15th century as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And
is this in the Catholic Church or
Orthodox.
Orthodox?
It's in Russia. I think it's in the Hermitage. I may be mistaken.
Okay.
But it's somewhere there.
But is that, when you say icons, is that it's thought of being written by God or something, or although it's entirely...
The Orthodox community believes that icons are God's word.
Okay.
We tend to think of God's word as written or spoken. But if you go into an Orthodox church, what you have is you have icons all over the place. It's a very dramatic effect to have, in Hebrews it says, "Behold, we are surrounded by such a great host of witnesses." You go into an Orthodox church and there they are, all these saints looking at us. And so they believe that God's word is visual as well as verbal. And that's an equally important part of the way that God communicates to us. I think it's worth considering, actually. So Rublev, and then Rembrandt. There's two painters what we consider to be the greatest of all painters that have done the Bible, done studies of Bible more than anybody else, and one of them is Rembrandt. Look at this. Rembrandt did over 240 drawings and etchings of Bible scenes. 240. It's just staggering. And at least 60 oil paintings of Bible scenes. I mean, his output was tremendous, and his output of Christian scenes was just absolutely staggering. And there's a show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art of his Rivers paintings, and this is what the writer of the guide said. He was drawn to situations in which ordinary persons are transformed through contact with the divine presence. Isn't that great? Ordinary people, and the divine light shines and changes them. And Rembrandt did 3 studies of this scene of Genesis 18 at different points of time in his life. And here's the first one. He did this when he was 24. And it's really interesting to see it for a number of reasons. I mean, here is Abraham, and he's a vigorous old guy, He may be 90 years old, but yeah, he's looking good at 90. But, you're looking good at 92. I mean, this man is 90 years old. Can you believe that? Man, I want to be like you when I grow up. I'm trying.
How does he do it?
How does he do it? Married to a beautiful woman and living in Pacific Palisades. And how does he depict God as a young guy? He's 24 years old. He's full of himself. and he's telling Abraham what for. I mean, technically, it's brilliant. Even at age 24, Rembrandt has more technique than he needs. Now, this is one that he does when he's 40. And things change a little bit. This particular painting is only 9 inches. So that's why the texture is, it's just this beautiful miniature. And look how it's changed.
Check out Sarah.
I know, peeking out from
Yeah, right, yeah. Now we get, Sarah was even more in the shadows, but now she's kind of checking things out. And the Lord, I mean, that great sense of light that Rembrandt does so movingly in his paintings just shines here. And where is Abraham in relationship to the Lord? He's down quite a bit. Yeah, he's looking older. He's looking not quite as strong as he was before.
Not as vigorous.
And all centered around, whereas before the center was kind of bipolar, if you will, between the Lord and Abraham. Now it's clearly the focus is on the Lord himself. And when he turned 50, he did this etching. This is his third study. And look at Abraham now. Yeah.
Sure hold.
You know, and I think it's maybe Rembrandt's way of depicting what a miracle this really is. This really old guy who's going to have a baby, whereas before, you know, you're young, and, yeah, no problem. And that's Ishmael back there. Ishmael was known as a warrior. He's got his bow and arrow. And look at how God is pictured. God isn't a young guy anymore. The Lord is an old guy. But all of them, you know, marvelous, marvelous studies of God coming and receiving hospitality and giving this amazing gift in return. Well, who would be the other painter? Any guesses as who the other painter was? Don't say Daniel. Leonardo did a lot, but I'm talking now in terms of volume as well. Leonardo, Caravaggio would be another one.
Michelangelo?
Michelangelo would be another one. The one who's done the most is Marc Chagall.
Oh, gosh.
Marc Chagall lived to be 97 years old, died in 1985, pretty amazing. Was born in Russia, lived in Paris, came to the United States for a while, went back to France. And this is what he was given a commission in 1929 to do some pictures of the Bible. And interestingly, he did two things. He went on 2 trips before he did these studies. One is he went to Israel, and he was just so moved by being in the Holy Land and back in touch with his Jewish roots, and he's just overwhelmed by the power of the Holy Land. The other was he went to Amsterdam to the Rijksmuseum to see Rembrandt's study of the Bible. You know, so he knew where a great artist was. And this is what Chagall said: "Since my early youth, I have been fascinated by the Bible. It has always seemed to me still that it is the greatest source of poetry of all time." You know, if only we could instill that in people, to read the Bible. It's such great, not because you better read the Bible. You know, source of the greatest poetry of all time. Since then, I have sought this reflection in life and in art. The Bible is like an echo of nature, and the secret I have tried to transmit in my work. So Marc Chagall did 2 studies of Genesis 18. Here's the first one in 1931. And it's light, and it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's just... a friend of Chagall described this painting as it's like, you know, God, the angels, they just dropped over for lunch. I mean, it's just a natural kind of thing. And it's like Abraham says, "A little brisket? Can I bring a little brisket? Gefilte fish? What can I get you?" And then in 1966, he did another one. And now Abraham says, "They're eating me out of house and home." I mean, what? Come on, you guys, give me a break. Wonderful studies of beautiful incarnation of hospitality and of the joy of this particular gathering. I hope you enjoy that as much as I do. I just think, you know, to see great painters do the Bible, it just enriches our view of this, I think, all the more. So then, oh yeah, you can still see these giant oaks in where we think is Mamre, we're not sure, between Jerusalem and Hebron. And Orthodox have, this is an Orthodox celebration, celebrate their number of times. So, okay, we've had a look at part of the founding story, hospitality. Here are some things I think we might derive from that. There's a sense of mystery in this story. Like, I think there's a mystery whenever we show hospitality. Even if you invite some really good friends over, you're not sure how the evening's going to go. You know, there's always an air. There's always a question mark. Always a mystery. Hopeful mystery, but an expectation. You never know what's going to happen. And then a big surprise. This turns out to be God. Okay? Another thing about hospitality is it's usually always a surprise involved in some way. And thirdly, mutual gift giving, as we talked before. Abraham gives a gift of hospitality to the three men, but they give a huge gift to him in return. And finally, the source is God's blessing, His blessing that we heard in Genesis 12, His blessing that's going to go, His power, hospitality, and goodness. So let's keep your Bibles open. Let's look at the rest of this chapter, because we're going to see, I would like to say, hospitality of a different kind. And this is another amazing, amazing passage. So would somebody be so kind as to read verses 16 to 33?
When the men got up to leave,
they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him, to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see what it is, to see if they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole city for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5 people? If I find 45 there," he said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke to him. "What if only 40 are found there?" He said, "For the sake of 40 I will not do it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20 I will not destroy it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 10 I will not destroy it." When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home.
It's one of the great passages in the Bible. I mean, I'm but dust and ashes, but, and I don't want to make you mad, but, I mean, it comes back again and again and again. And I would like to make a suggestion to you. This is a second look at hospitality. We were mystery, surprise, reciprocal blessing, source, God's blessing. I would like to think that this indicates hospitality of the heart. And one of the things that goes through all the studies of hospitality, I think in the Bible as well as in commentators on it, is there's 2 kinds of hospitality. There's hospitality of the hearth, of the home, which Abraham showed in the first story that we read, showing him, here's the food, here's what you need. And now Abraham shows the hospitality of the heart, opening himself to Sodom and Gomorrah, the most evil place in the time, and opening himself also to hospitality to God. Henry Nouwen has this great idea that prayer is hospitality to God. We opening up our hearts to God and say, "God, come into my heart." And Nouwen always says, that's a pretty dangerous thing to do, because God might have some other ideas than you about to whom you're to show hospitality. But I think in this one chapter from the book of Genesis, we see 2 kinds of hospitality. Hospitality of the heart and hospitality of the heart. and they're both tremendously important. In fact, we could say that the latter maybe comes before the former. So this founding story, we'll go through the rest of this rather quick. This founding story includes this big element of hospitality. Blessed to be a blessing, to show hospitality to others and share the gifts with other people. At the end of the book of Genesis, so we skip from the first part of Genesis, we see hospitality again. At the end of the book of Genesis, in Joseph, the first Joseph. And we all know the story about Joseph. He was the favorite of his father Jacob, and he lorded it over his brothers, so his brothers took it out on him, sibling rivalry. They throw him in a pit, they sell him into slavery in Egypt. He succeeds finally by interpreting Pharaoh's dreams and becomes then second in charge and has the brilliant idea of preparing for a famine. We prepare for earthquakes here in Southern California, but they prepared for another kind of catastrophe. And irony upon irony, what happens is he shows hospitality to his brothers in secret. You know, they come back, not just thinking that he's the second big honcho in Egypt. And that's a huge amount of hospitality, but even more so than through Joseph's actions, they show hospitality to the whole world. That's why the family of Joseph is there. This is my favorite Bible passage, by the way, Genesis 50:20. You thought evil against me, but God meant it for good. You know, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. There's nothing that God can't flip around and turn into good. And then there's this moving passage where Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers. I mean, he's there and he's kept up this masquerade for quite a while, but then finally he's just moved inside that he weeps, and he has to go outside and he weeps, and he comes back and he says, "I'm your brother. You know, all is forgiven." And so the book of Genesis ends with this magnificent story of hospitality to this family that had been broken up by conflict and jealousy and violence. You know, there was forgiveness and mutual hospitality. Well, and then, of course, there's the Exodus. We're just to show other parts of the Torah. And if we had time to look at these passages, what we find in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Exodus, a whole bunch of places, is Moses and God reminding the people to show hospitality to strangers because you were a stranger once yourself. Don't forget that. Remember, you were strangers in Egypt, and I showed hospitality to you. I brought you out of Egypt into this land flowing with milk and honey. So when you see a stranger, you remember who you are, and you show hospitality to them. To look at the prophets real quickly, the prophets not only proclaim God's truth to the there and then, to the here and now, but they announce this great day of the Lord, when finally the whole world would be free of evil and conflict. And how is it portrayed by Isaiah? It would be this great feast, this enormous banquet. So at the end of time, God is going to show hospitality to the whole creation in this feast that will not end. And then in the writings, there's this great passage. Let's just take a look at Proverbs 9, 1-6, because we don't want to leave women out of this. Just to show that we're not sexist. Proverbs 9, 1-6. Would somebody be so kind as to read these verses?
Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let them turn in here. To him who lacks sense, she says, "Come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live, and walk in the way of insight. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets
That's 1-6 is good enough. Great.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. That's great. Simple is translated in my Bible as immaturity, foolishness, stupidity. And so in all 3 strains of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, we see this importance of hospitality, about wisdom, inviting everybody to a feast, and meaning everybody, not just the Israelites, but the people all around the world. So a real quick third look We've had mystery, surprise, reciprocal blessing, source God's blessing, hospitality, the heart and heart. What we also see is God's blessing to all. I'd like to talk about the fulfillment story, talk about the founding story, fulfillment story, for 15 minutes, and then we're going to do a lot of talking among each other. Okay? We as Christians believe the Old Testament is fulfilled in Jesus Christ. His story is the fulfillment story. And I think his story illustrates different dimensions of hospitality. You'll find it on page 2, if that's of use to you. And one is, the life of Christ shows the importance of hospitality. The importance of hospitality. The importance of hospitality is pointed out because Jesus spent most of his ministry showing hospitality to other people. The feeding of the 5,000, as I'm sure you know, is the only miracle story told in all 4 Gospels. It's the only one. Other miracles are maybe one of the Gospels, 2 or 3. It's the only one in all 4. And it's Jesus showing hospitality, inviting people to have a meal. And he supplies the bread and the fish. A story of hospitality. But even when Jesus isn't feeding people, he's showing them hospitality in any one of a number of other ways. He says, come unto me if you need healing, if you need wisdom. Come. He's inviting them to enjoy his hospitality, of giving to them what it is that he has to give, of a whole range of things. The importance is shown by Jesus, last acts are the most important acts. Don't we often talk about our loved ones when they die, how they spent their last few days? How did Jesus spend his last day? He showed an act of unbelievable hospitality, because washing feet was something either you did for yourself. I mean, if you came to someone's home, they would give you water so that you would wash your own feet. Or you would have a slave do it, because hosts just didn't do that kind of thing. But this stunning act of Jesus on the night before he was going to be tortured to death. At a time, if I knew that was coming, I would want them to take care of me. Look, it's going to be, hey guys, hold my hand, tell me you love me, do something, take care of me. Instead he's washing their feet. And finally, at the center of our life as Christians is an act of hospitality. The central Christian act is Holy Communion, where once again tomorrow morning, Jesus is going to say, come and receive my body, my blood, my bread, my wine, my everything. So I think the first thing that the life of Jesus shows us is the dramatic importance of hospitality, something that Jesus invested most of his time in the years of his ministry. But also, we see the limits of hospitality, the limits that even Jesus experienced. R.Z. talked about this text. We read it last week, Mark 1:35. But there are others where Jesus just had to get away. He just had it up to here. He was burned out, if you will. He didn't have enough energy. And so time and time again, he would go away to a lonely place. I can't do it. Cut, that's it. But not only in these times do we see limits of hospitality, but we see Jesus accepting hospitality time and time again. He was one who allowed others to exercise their gift of hospitality. This is a Japanese rendering of the story of Mary and Martha. And we comment a lot about that story, about Martha was too busy, and Mary. But I think it's just Jesus enjoyed being invited over for a meal and having somebody listen to him, not wanting something from him. I mean, how many times are we just tired of having people want something from us? And you just relaxed and enjoyed being taken care of. And not only that, but he requested hospitality from a woman on another occasion. I said, please give me something to drink. It was a hot day in Samaria. One of my favorite storytellers is a guy by the name of John Shea. Maybe some of you know him. He's a former Catholic priest. He's been at the Religious Ed Congress a number of times, and he's written a couple of poems that this one means a lot to me. It's called A Prayer to the Pain of Jesus. A Prayer to the Pain of Jesus. Father, when crutches were thrown away, did your son limp after the running crowds? Did Jesus' eyes dim when Bartimaeus saw? Did life ebb in him when it flowed in Lazarus? When lepers leaped in new flesh, did scales appear on the back of his hand? The Gospels say Jesus felt power go out from him, but neglect to say whether at that moment pain came in. Did the Son of God take on ungrown legs and dead eyes in the terrifying knowledge that pain does not go away, only moves on? How many times haven't you shown hospitality to your spouse, to your kids, to your colleagues, to your neighbors, and you've taken in so much anxiety, so much stress, so much pain, so much of what people are struggling with, and all that stuff is going on inside of you? I just can't take it. I mean, there's so many times when that just would well, and I mean, somebody would say good morning to me, and I say, what do you mean good morning? What's good about it? And all of a sudden I realize I've taken so much of people's pain and heartache inside of me. And it's the same with Jesus, it's the same with hospitality. There's limits. You know? And Jesus illustrated those limits time and time again in his own life and ministry. There's also conditions. Under what conditions can hospitality be shown? That's another dimension of hospitality. And I don't think there's a better verse than this one where Jesus says, even those who give a cup of cold water in my name are doing my will. Just a cup of cold water. Not a whole lot, but if you're thirsty. One time, I've been up on the top of Half Dome twice. And one time I was coming down and I ran out of water. And it still was a long ways down to the valley. And I was going along and I asked somebody, do you have some water? I can't tell you how good that tasted. But there's also something about this famous story. This is Van Gogh, and he painted it on one of his very last paintings, and it hung over his coffin at his funeral. A lot of people question whether Van Gogh renounced his faith or not. And I think a lot of historical research shown that he did not. He did not commit suicide. There's a number of things going on in that. But let's just take a look at this famous story for just a second and read it once again. Luke 10:25-37. Because it has something, this story is commented upon a lot by early Christian teachers. Most famous story in the whole Bible. So somebody up for reading number one story.
And behold, a lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? How do you read? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered right. Do this, and you will live. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own beast and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these 3, do you think, proved neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, The one who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise.
Doesn't make preachers look very good. It's the one that, I don't know about you, whenever I read this story.
Yeah.
Thank you. What was, famous story, what was the condition of that circumstance? How would you describe it? Where the Samaritan showed, we talk about, you know, the difference between the priest, the Levite, and the rabbi, or the Samaritan. But just focus for a second on what was that circumstance? How would you describe that circumstance where the Samaritan showed compassion to the guy that was beaten half dead? How do you describe it?
Well, the Samaritan's not just another passerby. These people are at odds with each other. There's
That's right.
enmity between the man and the Samaritan.
Right,
The least likely person to help, you would think,
Right.
would be a Samaritan.
That's right. So it's in a context of what we would call intergroup conflict.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, to translate it into
Yeah.
modern terminology. So it's one of intergroup conflict. That's really important. And yet he still shows hospitality. Even though, you know, we got a Trump supporter over here and a Nancy Pelosi supporter over here. And they show, you know, compassion. Another thing about it, what else were you going to say?
He also ignored potential danger.
It's an environment of danger.
Yeah.
If this guy could get beat up and left for half, and you know, I could as well. It's not a rosy scenario. You know, it's no wonder the priest and the Levite hightailed it. You know, they want to intergroup conflict, danger, and another thing that commentators in the first centuries of Christian church comment upon was the condition of the Samaritan. What was his condition? He was pretty well-to-do, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. He had money. He also had a beast of burden. Okay? He had transportation. He had the time also. I mean, he wasn't hustling. You know, he could afford the time, kind of like the guy with the porta potties.
And they had open-ended hospitality too.
And he had open-ended hospitality as well. I'll come back again. Okay? What the commentators often said, St. Cyprian and others, is to say, how we might say this, is the Samaritan had the wherewithal, the resources to be hospitable. Which means it's okay to have stuff. I remember once when I went to a workshop about pastors, and I was pretty burned out at the time. And I remember this one guy, he was a really wise commentator, he said, people didn't kill Jesus because he was burned out, because he was strong. And this Samaritan was strong. You know, he had resources. The condition of his life was such that he could be able to be hospitable. And there's a very important preacher in this country. His name is Fred Craddock. He's written a lot of books, probably one of the best preachers in the United States. He says a lot of times what we like to think of is if we're going to be hospitable or make a contribution, we're going to give $1,000. We're going to do some dramatic thing for people. But he says so oftentimes it's just giving a quarter or a nickel or something. We just pay it out over time. So what I think the story has a number of interesting things to say is it's okay for us to live in Pacific Palisades or Orange County or West LA. You know, we don't have to give up everything in order to follow Jesus. We just have to use it well. Which is tricky because we come to the next thing here is the temptations of hospitality. And Jesus told a number of stories about the temptations of hospitality. We won't read it, but the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Who did the rich man show hospitality to?
His friends.
His friends. His friends. You know, the people that were people who were wealthy. And one of the temptations, you know, okay, it's okay for me to have stuff, you know, to live in Venice and all of that. Well, I'm just going to kind of take care of myself and my people. But, you know, that's a temptation. And Jesus tells this very profound story because where does the rich man go? He doesn't go to heaven. And where does Lazarus go? Where does Jesus say Lazarus goes? Exactly.
The bosom of
Bosom
Abraham.
of
The bosom of Abraham, Mr. Hospitality himself. You know, the story that we read before about Abraham, Herod the Great erected a statue to Abraham near the Oak of Mamre. It became a celebrated statue. It's not around anymore of generosity and hospitality. And Jesus alludes to Abraham's hospitality, and so do the rabbis time and time again. So the temptation, when we get a lot of stuff, is to keep it to ourselves. And similarly, at the Pharisees' home, Jesus went to Pharisees' homes a number of times, and he went to their home this time, and he said, the Pharisee, who should you invite? Do you remember the story? Who should you invite to your parties?
People who can't repay you.
People who can't repay you. How many times haven't you been involved in something like I have a million times? Well, so-and-so invited us over, so now
We should invite them.
we got to invite them back. Or we invited them, but they never invited us back. And we go back and forth all that. I'm not sure where this all lies, but Jesus really talks about the temptations of hospitality, to keep it in your own circle and to not reach out to the lame and the blind and the halt and others. Jesus was always encountering these Pharisees, and this guy John Shea that I mentioned to you said something once at one of the congresses that I'll never forget. So this is the difference between the Pharisees and Jesus. The Pharisee said, "We will eat with you if you shape up." Where Jesus said, "I will eat with you, and I'm sure that you will then shape up." Pretty cool distinction, isn't it? There's a lot of times we don't want to show hospitality to people because, there are bad people. There are bad people out there. There are sociopaths out there. There are people who will take advantage of you. There are narcissists out there. And it's always a question mark. Should we show hospitality to them or not? And I don't know how to deal with that one. I think that's up to each one of us. But I think what Shea is saying, that Jesus showed hospitality to all kinds of people, and he was convinced they would shape up as a result. The power of hospitality. We've been talking about this in a way with importance, and what we shared last night, the power of those stories. Miracle after miracle. It's just amazing. Look at this. Remember the story of Zacchaeus? It's an African rendering of the story. There's Zacchaeus up there in the tree, the short little guy. And what does Jesus do? He offers him fellowship. Jesus comes into Jericho, and everybody's gathering around. The mayor is there, and the members of the city council, and the elders. And who's going to want to have Jesus over? The mayor, and the city council, and all the big shots. Who does Jesus go to? But this guy, the guy that everybody hates. Because what kind of tax collector is he? He's a chief tax collector. He's the only chief tax collector in the New Testament. We got a bunch of tax collectors, but he's the chief guy. And so he says, "I'm going to come over to your place." So Jesus shows hospitality of giving him dignity and respect. And then Zacchaeus invites him over. And what does Zacchaeus do?
Changes.
He changes,
Changes everything.
offers to repay everything he wrongfully took.
Fourfold.
4 times over.
4 times over. Whoa! What got into this guy? The power of hospitality is just unbelievable. And this great chapter in Luke, I never noticed this before, but there's 3 stories. You know what they are? First story is the lost what?
Coin. The lost sheep.
Lost sheep, and
Lost
then
coin.
the lost coin, and then
Lost
the
boys.
lost son. Lost
Boys.
boy.
Prodigal son.
Boys, okay, thank you. I have my theological advisor. And so we know the story, but I just noticed something that I'm sure you probably noticed. So what happens after the shepherd finds the lost sheep? He throws a party. He invites all of his friends. He shows hospitality. And so what happens to the woman after she finds her coin? She throws a party. She invites her friends over. Hospitality. What happens when the father gets his one son back? He throws a party. Yeah, right. The power of hospitality says this is really important. You are really important. Hospitality has such great power to reinforce that. You can imagine the father saying, "Well, welcome back. Yeah, you're my son. Go to your room." You know, we'll fix the room up for you, okay? Work starts tomorrow, 8 o'clock. And you're welcome back, son. We're so glad you're here. We'll see you at 8. He throws this big party, and then the question is whether the other son, other son is going to join as well. The power of hospitality, when we received an invitation or when someone noticed something that we did, and took note of it, I mean, gosh, it just stays with us, forever and ever. And look at this. For 3 years, Jesus shows hospitality to these guys, and they're a ragamuffin crew, But after those 3 years, and after the denial and the betrayal and the abandonment and all that stuff, they go on and they change the world. It's the power of hospitality. And then we see Jesus' radical hospitality. His radical hospitality. Because he's on the cross. And what does he do on the cross? He says to that thief, today you will be inviting him into paradise. In a time of excruciating pain, of absolute humiliation, stripped of the last shred of clothing and dignity, bereft of everything. And not only that, but as part of the central act of our redemption, is both the cross and the resurrection, he goes and he shows hospitality to those guys. And where were they heading after the crucifixion? Out of town. Getting out of here. It's all over with. Forget about it. We misplaced our hope in the wrong guy, and Jesus comes. And once again, they invite him in for dinner, but the guest becomes the host. And he breaks bread, and once again they recognize who he is. And then this great story where Jesus fixed breakfast at the Sea of Galilee. One of the best Bible studies I ever heard was about this guy who said that Jesus said two things that you never say to fishermen. What do you never say to fishermen?
What did you catch?
Have you caught anything? Right.
Yeah.
Why don't you ever say that to a fisherman? Because he'll lie. They're liars. All fishermen are liars. Right? No. It's endemic. They're all liars. So they're not going to tell you the truth. And then what's the second thing you don't say to a fisherman? You don't tell him how to fish. Because he knows more than you. They're not only liars, they're arrogant. They always know more than you. So Jesus does both these things. And once again, mystery, like we said before, mystery through the myths. Here he is, and he's inviting them back, and he says to Peter 3 times, do you love me? Feed my lambs.
And he's cooking a meal for him.
And he's the one that's serving the meal. Yeah.
It's fish.
It's fish. Right, that's right. Yeah. Maybe a few other things, but right. So why be hospitable? Diane, you gave us a number of reasons last night. Very profound. Let me just point out a few of them. Matthew 25 is the biggie on this one. But this story can be not necessarily misunderstood, but it can be tweaked the wrong way. You remember how the story goes? It's the last. Maybe we should read it. Matthew 25, 31 to 46. So once again, if somebody would be so kind as to read the story, I appreciate it.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, and he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at the left. And the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." And the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then he will say to those at his left hand, you that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. And they also will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, or thirsty, or stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison? I did not take care of you. Then he will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, the righteous into eternal life.
Heavy story, but it always reminds me of when I was a boy at the church I grew up in. Our pastor, I must have been 10 or so, he would always tell an interesting story to start, and then he'd go off on a lot of stuff. And I don't remember the stuff. I'd always remember the opening story, and then he'd lose me, after that. But I remember one time he was preaching on this text, and he was working himself up to a real rhetorical flourish, and for some reason I was staying awake, and he said, and as the Lord said, I was naked, and you gave me to drink. I say that because the story doesn't always come across as being very happy. It's pretty heavy. And I think we need to understand the story in a couple of contexts. One is, where does it come in the Gospel of Matthew? Right before the Passion narrative. Right as close to the end as you can get. And I think that's important, because what the disciples have gotten is they've gotten so much from Jesus already. So much grace, so much wisdom, so much love, that I think that's one of the reasons why they will say, well, we didn't notice you. Because they were given so much, they just couldn't help from giving it away, time and time again. And it comes right before the time when Jesus is going to die for sinners. This is the stunning thing about Jesus' hospitality. It's like on the cross and other things. He welcomed and gave hospitality to sinners. I mean, it's one thing to say, to take care of the poor and the naked and the hungry, but it's another thing to show hospitality to bad people. People that we consider to be bad. That's what sinners are. And that's one of the dramatic things about Jesus' hospitality. So what these disciples have gotten is, it's only natural for them to share because they've been given so much. And then this whole thing about hell. I mean, that's one of the most toxic teachings in Christianity today. And, we should probably do a whole retreat on that one to try to defang it, because that's something that has turned more people off. This is the way I understand it. Hell is regret. That's regret. That's what it is. It's not something that God inflicts on someone. It's something because of our life we have inflicted on ourselves. And the older, that's part of the problem with being older, is I regret a lot of times when I did not show hospitality. When I was too caught up with my own busyness, or my own pride, or my own self-importance, that I ignored someone else's need. And that's hell. That's the kind of hell that I ask God's forgiveness for, time and time again. And I think that's our mission as Christians, is to save people from that hell of regret. That they were so taken up with getting all this stuff, all these things, all these gadgets, that they ignored their spouse or their children or their neighbors or others. We want to save them, literally, I mean, this is traditional Christian language, but we want to save them from hell. And I take that very, very literally. So I think this story is tremendously profound. And I think the accent is on the gospel. So that leads me to, fourth look, God's blessing to all the different dimensions and radical hospitality of Jesus. But I want to, before we break up, I want to give a pitch for a Lutheran view of hospitality. So if you're going to be a Lutheran, I think the Lutheran Church has given a tremendous gift to all of Christianity. And it's why I'm still a Lutheran. Because I think there's a crucial theological distinction that's not found in other denominations. It's there in embryo, but it's not found as clearly as it is in Lutheran teaching. And I say that not with pride, but because of gratitude. And that's the distinction between the law and the gospel. An absolutely crucial distinction. And looking at it from this standpoint, the law, let's take a look at the law of hospitality. I'm sure that some sociologist somewhere has written about the law of hospitality. What is the law of hospitality? Well, the law of hospitality works like this. If you don't show hospitality to other people, they will not show hospitality to you. Right? That's the way it works. One of the problems with older people a lot of times, having worked at a nursing home, is older people isolate themselves. And what happens, a lot of times people don't want to spend time with them after a while. So the law of hospitality is for people, if you don't show hospitality to others, they're not going to show it to you. What's the law of hospitality in churches? If congregations aren't welcoming and hospitable to other people, what happens to the church? It shrinks. It dies. And that's happening to too many churches these days for a lot of reasons. What is the law of hospitality in nations? If we don't find a way of showing hospitality to people who are different from us, what happens to countries? They divide and fracture, and finally the whole civic enterprise disintegrates. I think that's what's happening now in our country, in our churches. That's the law of hospitality, if you will. Now, what happens when you function under the law? You're always aware of the fear of punishment. We have some lawyers in the room. What happens if you break the law? You are punished. That's the way the law functions. The law has a lot of important qualities to it, but it always has that threat of punishment. And if you function with the law, you're always going to do things under a sense of obligation. I better do it, because there's always that little word, or else, should, I better do it, or else, you know, sweetheart, we're not going to have any friends if we don't have people over every so often, you know. Or the church says, we're shrinking, we're dying, we better go, you know, find some way to get people in here, or else we're going to die. Or in the country, you know, gee, what are we going to do? And what happens, though, is it results in feelings of guilt or anger. I mean, when people tell me that I got to do something, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? You know, that voice always goes on inside of me. Or rebellion. I'll be doggone if I'm going to do that. Or finally despair. I can't do it enough. I mean, how hospitable do you want me to be, God? I mean, I've done everything. I mean, you know, that's the way the law goes. And it's based on human action. It's based on what I can do. My abilities, my qualities, my gifts, or whatever. But I believe what Jesus is accenting in that story, and we've seen in the life of the Christ, is the gospel. The gospel of hospitality. This is what I think this retreat is about. The gospel, the good news. And that is, our hospitality is based on grace, on a gift that's been given to us. And yeah, we always haven't been hospitable. I know that very, very well in my life. But we believe in forgiveness. Jesus shows hospitality to sinners like me and like you. And that leads rather to obligation, but opportunity. Well, there's an opportunity here. This is incredible. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. But I see there are people in need here. And this is really cool. I've got an opportunity. And it leads to what Paul says is the fruit of the Spirit. As R.C. just mentioned, this is based on God's action then. That leads to love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, and all the rest. So the gospel of hospitality is what we're talking about here. You know, we could guilt trip each other time immemorial. You know, why aren't you out there doing all of this kind of stuff, you know? And we say, yeah, I should. Yeah. You bet. I'll get around to it. You know, I'll get back. but we're talking about the gospel. And I think this is such a crucial distinction, so crucial, that we believe in the good news. This is based on promises, God's promise that God is going to bless this in some way. And what Martin Luther says is that we're always turning Christ into Moses. We're always turning the gospel, the good news of God's grace, into another law, into another program, into something we've got to do if our church is going to survive, if we're going to have any friends, etc. Rather than saying, wow, this is an opportunity that's just unbelievable. So, we've got 45 minutes, and I'd really see us doing a lot of talking among each other. So this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to get into groups of 3, not 4, not 5, but 3. Okay? Spouses can stay together, but it's better if you're not, just not that you're going to fight or anything. You might. There's always that possibility. Always that possibility. So groups of 3, and I'd like you just to talk for a while about what are your issues. What are your issues about hospitality, whatever they might be? My wife and I have issues over hospitality. I'm more of an extrovert, she's more an introvert. So we've had a lot of fights over how often we should have people over. Okay? That's an issue in our marriage. And we dance around that one a lot. Okay? Haven't worked that out. Maybe you have an issue like, gee, I've been so hospitable now, can I do it anymore? Or I haven't been. I don't know what your issue, but just find 2 other people and talk about what your issues are around hospitality. Okay, everybody get it? Thanks.